Hey, how you doing? And welcome to another video piano lesson. Today's lesson we're going to talk about the fun part, how to take all those techniques we just learned and how to actually implement them into a song and build a song from scratch. Alright, so I came up with basically a 7-step process that I always use. Now note that this is the one I used when I was first starting out. Like once you get to a certain point, you no longer have to go through all 7 steps, so don't freak out that it's going to take you a super long time every time you learn a song. But when you first start out, you really want to be following these steps because it makes it super simple and super easy to make a song sound awesome, basically. Alright, so let's get right onto it. So the first step I always do is learn the song bare bones. So what that means is just single note, right hand melody, and just whole note block chords in the left hand. So I'm going to do an example throughout this whole thing so it makes sense and it's you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to do the song just the way you are because I've been doing that through a lot of these videos, so I want to kind of keep it consistent so you guys understand exactly what I'm talking about. Alright, so when I first learn a song, all I'm going to do is and figuring out the chord progression, that's kind of a thing for the ear training course, or you can also look up the chords online or something like that. But for the example, just the way you are, the chords are F major, D minor, B major, and then back to F. So the left hand sounds like this. So first step, practice that left hand deal, got it. Then practice the right hand alone. And then eventually get them hands together. Alright, so notice I don't try to add in the flashy stuff right away. It's going to make it a lot harder to learn. You want to do step by step. So first you just learn bare bones, single note melody, left hand block chords, and just drill it into your system. Alright, so that's step 1. Now step 2, what you want to do is script out the structure of your song. So you want to say, okay, the first verse, I want this kind of quality to it. The first chorus, I want it to sound bigger. Then the second verse, I want it to sound, still have the energy, but be a little softer and kind of bring the energy down. And then last chorus, bring it up to a maximum energy. And that whole thing, that's a topic for an entire video. So that's the other video in this lesson. Make sure you watch that if you haven't already. I think it's titled like Emotional Quality or the four quadrants or something like that. But that goes in detail, in depth, how to do that. All right, so that's step 2. So once you have the structure laid out, now you need to add in left hand patterns that make sense with that structure. So we went over a ton of left hand patterns. Now let's say for this example, we want the first chorus to be kind of like sensitive, kind of emotional sounding, we don't want it too big because it's just the first chorus. So we might choose the left hand pattern that goes like this, which is one of my favorite ones. So then you'd practice left hand alone through the chord progression. And obviously you might have to practice it, slower than that the first time and work it up to that speed. And then you want to get it hands together, right hand just single notes, just like we've been doing so. Alright, so you want to do that for every section of your song. So for example, maybe you want a chorus later in the song that has a bigger, more in-your-face sound. So you might start practicing some jump bass patterns, some and so on, and get that worked into your system too. So for every section, you want to do that. You want to practice the left hand part, then right hand single notes. Alright, so that's step 3, add left hand patterns. Step 4 is add the right hand type. Now I haven't talked too much about this, so I'm going to go over it a little more in depth. So there's 3 main types of right hands you use. So the first one is single notes. It's great if you're trying to keep it simple, if you want a very minimalistic sound. The second kind is octaves. So it's the exact same thing as single notes, but you play it in octaves. So that might sound something like and typically octaves give it more of a big sound. So a lot of times I'll use octaves when it goes more into the chorus section of a song. All right, so that's the second type, octaves. And the third type is, it's basically the same as single notes, but you're gonna add in chord tones with other parts of your right hand within the melody. And this is definitely the hardest one to do. So for example, if I'm doing the beginning starts on an F chord. So while I'm playing the melody, at any time with my right hand, I can play an F, A, or C below the melody notes. So I could do F and C, and then it switches to a D minor chord. So notice I'm playing this F and this D below the melody. And you don't have to do it for every note, just on some notes add in a chord tone below. And then it switches to B flat, so maybe. So I added this D in because the chord B flat has B flat, D, and F. So you just pick one of those notes, add it in. So that has this D and this F. And then it's back to an F chord. So I'm just going to add this C because I can add F, A, or C. And that last kind is definitely the toughest to work in because the other two types, like obviously single notes is going to be easy. Octaves to me is actually easier than that. It might be a little tougher from a technique standpoint, but you don't have to think. You know, you just play the same melody notes in octaves. You don't have to think about, okay, what's the chord, what notes belong to the chord, how am I going to play that with it. So when you add in these right hand patterns, again, you want to think of emotional quality. So octaves are going to give a much bigger sound. If you want power, you go for octaves. You want minimalism, you go for single notes. Honestly, for emotional quality, I think the best is when you have the chord tones beneath the melody notes. I think that's the best one. But you can, mess with a couple different ones, see which ones you like better, see which ones fit with the song well. All right, so that's step 4. So now we have our left hand and our right hand patterns. So let's say I'm doing chord tones and that left hand pattern. So it sounds like this. All right, so that's first 4 steps. So remember, first is learn the song bare bones, single notes and block chords. Second is script out the structure. Third is add the left hand pattern. Fourth is add the right hand type. Okay, so now the 5th thing we add is flares, roll chords, trills, little things like that. So little things between the melody notes that are going to make it sound cooler. So for example, I already have, the structure kind of laid out. So if I'm going for an emotional sound, I might add some rolled chords. So now it sounds like this. Oh, and actually first, practice right hand alone. So I might practice. And if you notice for the roll chords, a lot of times it ends up kind of taking the place of the right hand type that's playing the chord tone below, because you are playing the chord tones below, you're just happening to roll, you just happen to be rolling them. So that's something you can add. You can add a left hand, maybe like an arpeggio flare, so maybe you could add something like that in there. If you want to add some trills, some tremolos maybe, something, just little things in between the melody, just the little things that make it sound a lot cooler. All right, so that's the next step. And the step after that is you want to add intro, outro, and transitions. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and talk about these. So there's a couple things I like to do with intros a lot. One, sometimes I just play really soft and simple. A lot of times if you're going for the emotional mood, it really brings it in. And I might not even play the melody. I might just play the chord tones. So I might play something like. And you notice I kind of like messed with some stuff. I added some stuff in there. So it might be like chord, then a couple random chord tones and another chord. And a lot of times that's a cool little, way to intro it. Another thing I like to do is I just do one of the big arpeggio runs for the intro. So it might sound something like this. A lot of times that gives it a lot of ambience. And another reason I do that is because I do YouTube videos. And if you've done YouTube videos, the first 5 seconds are like huge if you want people to keep watching. So a lot of times if you do the slow, the boring stuff, a lot of times people will click off before they even watch the video. So sometimes I like add in a big thing right away just to grab people's attention. So sometimes that's a good thing to add. Then for the outro, a lot of times the same thing. I'll do my big sweep. Sometimes, like I said, glissandos. Glissandos down to an end note are a great way to end off the piece. A lot of times I end it with just like if I'm going for more a sensitive ending, I might just end with like a 9th chord arpeggio up, just and kind of slow it down at the end. A lot of times that's a cool feel. For the transitions, again, it's kind of, you decide what emotional quality you want. So maybe you're going from a very slow, sad emotional quality to a bigger emotional quality. A lot of times you want to build up for the transition. One of my favorite things to do for transitions is you literally just take a block chord and pound it out, but you start soft and you build it up. So it's like, and then you go right into the chorus. So let's say, what's the example? For the end of the verse, let's say it goes, what is it? Say. So I might be doing. So you see how I stopped playing that pattern and I went to, and it kind of brings all the energy level up, and then I can go into. That's another good thing, a little trick for transitions is you take the third of the chord, so if we're doing an F chord, the third is an A, and you just walk down from the A to the root, so it's, and that F chord lands on beat 1, so that's another cool transition. Sometimes if I want to I add what I call a non-tempoed transition. So all the transitions I've done so far, it makes sense, like it's the beats go into the next thing, if that makes sense. So I'm playing the verse, there's no pause, it just goes right into the chorus. But sometimes I might be doing a really sad thing and I need like a big, just complete transition. So I might be doing so it's basically like, it's not supposed to line up with the song. It's not supposed to be the actual song. You kind of just like add it in, and people will understand, oh, this is the transition to the next section. I don't use those as much because, I don't know, they're a little bit cheater because it's sometimes hard to transition from the verse to the chorus. So instead of like learning an actual transition, you just like add that in. It's like, oh, I don't have to learn a transition because I'm just doing this cool thing instead. But it's a cool little way to mix things up sometimes. Or a lot of times I'll do something like that, I'll do one of the big flashy things, and that kind of it brings it from, oh, this is the slow part, okay, this is like the big, crazy part. All right, so that's the next step. And the step after that is basically just practice it. And like I said throughout these videos, the key to it is a couple things. One, use all the techniques I've been telling you about, all the accelerated learning techniques. If you haven't watched those videos, please watch that because they'll help you learn it much, much faster and much more solidly. And the second thing is, like I'm saying, you want to take everything step by step. So don't, every step, go back to hands separate before you go to hands together. So like, maybe you have the bare bones, like the left hand pattern. You have the left hand pattern down, but before you go to adding the flares hands together, go back to hands separate. and practice that hand separate, and then add in the left hand with the hands together. And same with all, the transitions, everything. You want to start hands separate, you want to start slowly, and you want to gradually work up the tempo. I'm telling you guys, like the first song you learn with this system, it's going to take you a long time because every time you're always going to be checking back to your steps. And don't worry, I'll put a PDF or something with all the steps in it down below. But you're always going to be going back to all these different steps. But once you've done it a couple times, then it's going to get a lot easier. And you don't even have to think about the steps. They're just kind of like ingrained in your system. And you can just do it. And one last thing I want to say is, like, this is a very structured system. Here's how you make the song. You put the intro in, and then the verse is different, and you put the verse in. And it's great when you're first learning. When you're first learning, like anything, you need structure. If you're going to be a writer, you need to know the structure of, okay, I have my thesis statement, and then I have 3 supporting details, conclusion. And when you first start out writing, you write exactly in that structure. You don't mess with it. But then once you become, if you're a professional writer, you know that system, but then you can tweak it. You might know, okay, for this specific piece that I'm writing, I might need my thesis statement, not till the 3rd paragraph because it wouldn't make sense otherwise. Or maybe I need 4 supporting details instead of 3. But it's the same with piano. Start off with the structure, but eventually you might say, you know what, I might want the second half of my verse completely different than the first half of my verse. I might not use any of these formulas. I might just add in something, take out some of the melody and just add something in. Like I do rap songs a lot. And a lot of times when I do rap covers, I don't play the rap part. I just like improvise over the rap part. But that's something, after you learn the structure and after you know it, you can kind of mess with it. You can tweak it. You can really make it your own. So eventually, I really want you guys to get to the point where you're not copying step by step, but you're making up your own. You're making up your own techniques. So that's all I want to say. Remember all these, the flares, all that stuff, all the cool, crazy stuff, all that is in the lessons before that. So make sure before you really try to put it into a song, make sure you learn some of these really good, some of these techniques. And I'll have, that has a step-by-step way to learn it, the correct form to learn it, and it tells you the accelerated learning techniques. So it's really important you watch those before you really start putting it into a song. All right, that's all I got. I hope this lesson helped you guys out. Thanks a lot for watching. Peace out and happy practicing.